My son called at 1:13 a.m. Mum, promise you won't call the police. I ran down to the parking lot and opened his sedan. I froze. Inside lay my late husband's medal box, my financial ledgers, the deed transfer to the lodge with my forged signature, and a burner phone buzzing with an unread message. Mom, he whispered. I got them back before they could finalize the transfer. My name is Clara Beaumont. I am 61 years old, a widow, and I am the owner of the Lantern Cove Lodge. This isn't some inheritance. It's a boutique hotel on the bay that I built from a condemned plot of land with my own hands after I turned 55. It is my life's work, my fortress, and my home. The night air was cold, biting through my robe as I stood in the staff parking lot. The call from my son, Derek, my 33-year-old son, had come at 1:13 in the morning, shattering the deep coastal silence. His only plea was, Mum, promise you won't call the police. Now. I understood why. The trunk of his sedan was a diorama of my life, vandalized. My late husband's naval medals, the heavy box I kept polished in my office, my financial ledgers, torn raggedly from their binders, and resting on top, the deed transfer for the Lantern Cove Lodge, the ink still feeling damp in the humid night air, with a forged signature where my name should be. Next to it, a cheap burner phone buzzed, illuminating the horrifying collection. I picked up the phone. A message thread was open. It was a voice memo, already playing. I recognized the smooth, clipped tones of my daughter-in-law, Lena Vale, and the abrasive certainty of her mother, Marla. It's all set, Lena's voice said. We just need to finalize the signature tomorrow morning with the notary. She'll be so relieved to have the burden lifted. Good. Marla's voice snapped back. By the time she realizes what's happening, we'll be in control. The phone slipped from my fingers. It wasn't just the theft. It was the forgery. I stared at the signature on the deed. It was a near-perfect imitation of my own, but I recognized the subtle, practiced loop of the C. It was the handwriting of a relative, someone who had sat at my dinner table. The betrayal was so profound, it stole the air from my lungs. Mom Derek was leaning against the car door, his face pale and shadowed. I looked at him. The medals. The papers. You did this? No. His voice cracked. God, no. I took them. I stole them from Lena's house tonight. From her locked desk. He was shaking. They were going to file it tomorrow. Mum, I couldn't let them do this to you. I couldn't. I closed the trunk with a quiet, heavy click. The sound echoed in the empty lot. I looked at my son, a man I suddenly wasn't sure I knew at all. One chance, I said. My voice was low, steady. It didn't shake. I want the whole truth, everything, from the beginning, before sunrise. I held his gaze. You give me that, and I will honor my promise. I will not call the police. Yet. He looked relieved, and then a new wave of terror washed over his face. Mum, that's not all. They're coming. This weekend. What are you talking about? The Vales, Lena, Marla, the whole family. They booked 6 rooms. 6. They told me it was to inventory the property. He finally said it. They think the lodge is theirs. A cold, hard clarity settled over me. They weren't just planning a theft. They were planning an occupation. And they were planning to do it on my turf. I walked back inside, past the night auditor, who looked up with sleepy concern. I went straight to the front desk phone. Jason, I said, my voice crisp. I need the conference room unlocked and set up immediately, and start a fresh pot of coffee. A large one. I have a feeling it's going to be a very long night. I would not be a victim in my own home. This was my territory. Tonight, I was the one in command. The fluorescent light of the conference room hummed, a harsh, sterile sound that didn't belong in my lodge. Outside this room, the lantern cove was all warm woods, salt air, and soft lighting. I built it that way. After my husband passed, I was adrift. The silence in our suburban house was too loud, so I sold it. I took every cent, leveraged it against a terrifying bank loan, and bought a plot of condemned land that looked over the bay. People said I was crazy, a widow past 55 playing pioneer. I didn't care. I learned concrete forms. I argued permits. I sanded floors until my hands bled. I poured my grief and my savings into that dirt, and I raised the Lantern Cove Lodge from it. Then Derek met Lena Vale. She was sharp, polished, and carried a debilitating obsession with her social standing. Her family, the Vales, operated on a level of quiet, old money judgment I hadn't known existed. They were polite, but they evaluated everything. My clothes, which were practical. My voice, which was Midwestern. My hands, which were not soft. I will never forget our first dinner. It was at some sterile, high-end restaurant Lena had chosen. Marla, Lena's mother, fixed me with a smile that never touched her eyes. She picked at her salad. Clara, this little lodge venture of yours is just so admirable, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Tell me, do you have an actual degree in business administration? Or is this all just on-the-job training? The air crackled. The insult was so clean, so precise. It was almost surgical. I looked at Derek. I waited. Just a heartbeat. For my son to say, Mum built that place from nothing. To say, she knows more than you think. He did nothing. He just cleared his throat, picked up his water glass, and took a long, slow drink. He was keeping the peace. That silence was the first betrayal. It was the moment I realized the Vales weren't just judging me. They were teaching my son to be ashamed of me. So I went back to the lodge. I dug in. If I was just on the job, I would be the best. I taught myself coastal marketing. I memorized the state tax code. I became a licensed local guide. The lodge became my armor and my testament. We started getting write-ups in regional magazines. We hosted intimate weddings. We were booked solid. I tried to share the victories with Derek. We hit our quarterly goal, I'd text. Or, come see the new patio. The fire pits are in. The replies, when they came, were always delayed and always felt filtered. Mum, that's great. Derek is swamped right now. A huge networking event. Lena would reply from his phone. We'll have to reschedule. They always rescheduled. I am a proud woman. I will not beg for my son's time. I set a boundary. If my relationship with my child was going to be a constant, exhausting negotiation managed by his wife, I was withdrawing my side of the trade. I stopped asking. 3 years went by like that. This weekend is the lodge's anniversary. I sent Derek a simple, printed invitation, not a desperate plea, a formal invitation. To my surprise, he called me, his voice sounding bright for the first time in years. I'll be there. Mum? I wouldn't miss it. A flicker of hope. It was a mistake. As Derek just confessed in this cold, awful room, Lena had immediately used his acceptance as a trigger. While he was promising me he'd come for the anniversary, She was simultaneously booking 6 rooms for this weekend. She'd labelled the reservation Vale Family Property Inventory. She hadn't just rescheduled. She had planned a hostile takeover. And as I sat there, staring at the forged deed on the polished table, I knew how. The signature was a good copy. But the C in Clara, it looped in a specific, slightly old-fashioned way. It was the exact handwriting of Derek's Aunt Diane, a part-time notary. This wasn't just greed. This was a conspiracy. The sun rose late over the bay, casting a cold, grey light into the lobby. I'd been up all night, first absorbing Derek's fragmented confession, then planning. The lodge was quiet, smelling of the fresh coffee I'd brewed myself and the sharp scent of sea air. I had Jason, the night auditor, place a heavy, velvet-roped brass sign by the entrance before his shift ended. Private event. The lodge is closed for a private function. It wasn't true, not entirely, but it created the buffer I needed. It turned my lobby from a public space into a controlled theatre. Derek was already there, pacing near the unlit fireplace. He looked hollowed out, the shame rolling off him in visible waves. He couldn't meet my eyes. He just kept running his hands through his hair. I stood behind the solid oak check-in desk, my hands resting on the reservation terminal. This was my ground. At precisely 8:10 in the morning, the heavy glass doors swung open, and Lena Vale entered. She didn't just walk in. She made an entrance, pulling an expensive rolling suitcase behind her, sunglasses pushed back on her perfectly styled hair. She strode directly to the desk and, without looking at me, tapped the silver service bell. I remained still, just watching her. She tapped it again, harder, an impatient ding-ding. Finally, she looked up, and her polished smile faltered when she saw me. Clara, you're working the desk now. How quaint. I own the desk. Lena. And the building. I'm always working. She gave a tight, dismissive laugh and pulled out her phone. Well, listen. There seems to be a significant mix-up with our bookings. I have the entire Vale family arriving 6 rooms total, and I see you've kept the main suite under your own name. That won't work. Won't it? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. No, she said, as if speaking to a child. We need that suite for my mother. It's the only one with the proper vantage for assessment. You'll need to cancel your reservation. We need the space for important family. In the attached breakfast nook, 2 couples who were finishing their muffins paused, their own coffee cups halfway to their mouths. The audience, I thought, perfect. I leaned forward, clasping my hands on the desk. Let me be very, very clear. You will not be cancelling my reservation. You will not be assessing anything, and you have absolutely no authority here. Lena snapped, her head whipping toward her husband. He visibly flinched. Are you just going to stand there and let her speak to me this way? Mum? Lena, maybe we should do this in private? Derek mumbled, looking at the floor. I'm finished with private discussions, I said, my voice rising just enough to carry. The couples in the nook were now openly staring. Lena, the last time we spoke, you referred to the Lantern Cove Lodge as my little hobby. It is a hobby, she retorted, crossing her arms. A cute project to keep you busy. A hobby, I repeated. I turned to the computer screen, though I didn't need it. I knew the numbers by heart. My hobby cleared a 28% net profit last fiscal year. Lena, my hobby just passed its 5-year safety and operations inspection from the Harbour County Hospitality Board. with a perfect score. My hobby employs 12 people from this community. I leaned in, lowering my voice. My hobby is a registered, insured, and highly solvent corporation. So I'll ask you directly. What gives you the right to coordinate, assess, or otherwise interfere with assets that do not belong to you? Her face, so perfectly composed, flushed a dark, ugly red. She'd been exposed in public, and she hated it. I am trying to help you. Clara, she hissed. The people my mother is bringing the connections, this is a PR opportunity you couldn't possibly buy. We are trying to elevate this place from just a bed and breakfast. I am not interested in your PR. I am interested in my property, and I decline your help. Mom Derek finally moved, stepping between us, his hands up in a placating gesture. It was the gesture that had gotten us here. Please, just stop. Look, the Vales are already on their way. Let's not make a scene. Mom, maybe just for this weekend. You could stay at the Marriott down the highway, just to keep the peace. We can sort all this out on Monday. I looked at my son. He was asking me, the owner, to leave my own lodge to appease the woman who had just tried to steal it. The last flicker of hope I had for his immediate redemption died. The fire in my stomach turned to ice. I stood up to my full height. No. Daniel. His name was a sharp crack in the air. He winced. I will not be leaving. I looked past him, directly at Lena. This weekend was meant to be for me and my son. That is the only invitation that was extended. I pointed to the brass sign by the door. As of this moment, this lodge is closed to any guest not personally approved by me. If you, or your mother, or anyone else from your family attempts to check in, attempts to inventory so much as a single teaspoon, or trespasses on this property in any way, you will be removed. I paused, letting the silence hang. You are not welcome here. Lena didn't scream. She was too practiced for that. She simply vibrated with a white-hot, silent rage, her eyes promising retribution. She turned on a sharp heel, her suitcase wheels rattling angrily on the hardwood, and shoved her way out the glass doors, leaving a profound, echoing silence. Derek didn't move. He just stood in the middle of the lobby, a ghost at his own execution. The conference room, I said, not looking at him. I walked past him and went to the room where we'd spent the dark hours of the morning. He followed, his steps shuffling. I closed the door. I didn't sit. You have been paying for this life, haven't you? I said. It wasn't a question. He finally slumped into a chair, his head in his hands. The confession came out in a torrent, choked and pathetic. It wasn't just about the lodge. This had been happening for years. I got a promotion offer last spring, he whispered, his voice muffled by his hands. At the firm, partner track. I waited. It was a $28,000 raise, plus bonuses. I didn't know that. I said, You never told me. Because I turned it down, he said, looking up, his eyes red and desperate. I turned it down. Mom. Lena. Lena was afraid. She said she was afraid of the travel, of the hours I'd be away. She said it would pull us apart. He shook his head, a bitter, self-loathing laugh escaping his lips. But it wasn't that. It was that I got it. It was my success, not hers. She couldn't control it. He stood up and started pacing, just as he had in the lobby. And the money. God. Do you know we have $41,000 of debt on our joint account? For a kitchen. A kitchen? I've seen the photos she posts, I said, my voice flat. To entertain, she said. To host the right people. But the right people never come. It's just her and her mother, taking pictures. And my friends, where are they? Mom, Mark, Stephen gone. All of them. Lena got in a fight with Mark's wife over, I don't even know. Something about a charity board. She made me choose. She always makes me choose. And you just let them go. I finished for him. It's easier, he exploded. It's easier than the alternative. You don't understand. The arguments, they don't end. They go on for days, weeks. She twists everything. She remembers every word. She uses it all. It's exhausting. It's just easier to say yes. It's easier to be manageable. Manageable. That was the word. I let the silence sit. I did not go to him. I did not put a hand on his shoulder. I would not be the mother who soothed away his accountability. So you became manageable, I said, my voice hard as the oak table between us. You were manageable when you turned down $28,000. You were manageable when she spent $41,000 you didn't have. You were manageable when Marla Vale insulted my life's work at that dinner table, and you just drank your water. He flinched, remembering. And you were manageable this morning. Derek, in my lobby, when you asked me your mother to go to a Marriott, to keep the peace, while your wife and her mother proceeded with their plan to steal my home and my business. That's why I took the papers, he said, latching onto it. Don't you see I was trying to stop it? I heard them talking. They were going to file them this morning. I was trying to save it. To save you. I was going to get the papers, and I don't know. Destroy them. Fix it before you ever found out. Fix it, I said. By becoming a thief yourself. I was scared, he shouted. The first real anger I'd seen in him. I was scared to tell you. I was scared that if I told you, you'd do exactly what you promised you wouldn't. You'd call the police. And then what I'm the one who took the evidence. My fingerprints are all over it. I'd be an accessory. I'd be part of it. I was just trying to protect you. I walked toward him, and for the first time, he looked truly afraid of me. I am 61 years old. I built this place from mud and splinters. I do not need your protection. Daniel, I do not need a shield, and I do not need you to fix anything. I need the truth. All of it. And more than that, I need you to make a sovereign choice. You are done being manageable. You are done keeping the peace. You will either stand in the light with me, or you will stand in the shadow with them. There is no middle ground left. My challenge to Derek hung in the sterile air of the conference room. His choice. His sovereignty. He looked wrecked. But for the first time, a flicker of something other than fear was in his eyes. He nodded. A single, sharp movement. Okay, I said. The time for emotional processing was over. It was time for war. I walked to the head of the table, where the box from his trunk sat. I pulled out the burner phone, the tattered ledger, and the forged deed. I placed them in a precise line. We'll start with this, I said, holding up the cheap phone. The unread message notification was still blinking. I opened it. It was a thread between Lena and Marla, and it was a treasure trove. I found the voice memo from last night. I pressed play. Marla's voice, sharp and impatient, filled the room. Diane is confirmed. 10 a.m. at the cafe. Just get the signature. Lena. We'll file it before she even knows what's happening." Derek flinched, hearing the casual malice of his mother-in-law. 10 a.m., I said. That's in 90 minutes. They were moving fast. Next. I opened the ledger. The pages Derek had torn out. I spread them. "You said she was spending," I said to Derek. I ran my finger down the expense column. It wasn't just large purchases. It was a slow bleed. Hundreds, then thousands, siphoned off month after month. The recipient was always the same, Vale & Co. Lifestyle. "Is that a real company?" I asked. "It's just an LLC Lena and Marla set up," he said, his voice hoarse. "For I don't know. A blog. An influencer thing. I thought it was just a hobby." "Another hobby," I said. "One you've been funding." Then I found the most damning thing on the phone. It was in the photo gallery. A screenshot of an email. A payment receipt. "For services rendered, mobile notary fee." I read aloud. "From Vale & Co., Lifestyle, to Diane Beaumont." My blood ran cold. Derek's aunt. The proof. I put the phone down. I pieced it together. The full, ugly picture. This wasn't a vague, aspirational theft. This was a logistical timeline. The forged power of attorney, the paid-off, complicit notary. The weekend inventory wasn't a precursor. It was the final act. They were planning to walk in, with the deed already filed, and present me with new management as a done deal. They weren't just taking the lodge, they were setting the stage to have me declared incompetent, a burden to be managed. I grabbed my own phone and walked to the window, turning my back to Derek. I dialed the number I had on retainer, Maple Row Legal. A crisp voice answered. "I need Stephen. This is Clara Beaumont. It's an emergency." He was on the line in 10 seconds. "Clara, what's wrong, Stephen?" "I need a temporary restraining order, an emergency injunction. Something. Right now. I have evidence in my possession that my daughter-in-law has forged a deed transfer for the lodge and is attempting to file it as we speak." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Clara, do not move. Do not destroy. Do not alter. Do not touch anything more than you have to. Are the police there?" "No," I said, looking at Derek's reflection in the dark glass. "And they are not to be called. Not yet. That is my one condition." "I don't advise that," he said sharply. "This is fraud. This is criminal. I understand. But for now, this is how we are proceeding. What can you do? I can file an emergency petition with the county court. I can put a temporary freeze on any and all transfers related to the property's parcel number. It will hold, at least for 48 hours. But Clara, you have to preserve the evidence. Don't break the chain of custody. Don't contaminate the scene." "The scene is my conference room," I said. "I'll hold it. Thank you. Stephen." I hung up. I turned to Derek. "I'm keeping my promise to you. No police." I walked to the door, locked it, then walked to my office and locked that too. I called my day manager. "Sarah, I need you to go into the security system. Back up all footage from the lobby, from 8 a.m. to 8:15 a.m. this morning. Save it to a drive. And then I need you to prepare the conference room. Fresh coffee. Water. Legal pads and pens. For 5 people." Derek looked confused. 5. "Who you?" "Me, Lena, Marla, and your Aunt Diane. Mum. They'll never come. Not after this morning. They will if you call them." I said. "You're going to call them. You're going to say I'm distraught and willing to negotiate the terms of the inventory. You're going to set a meeting. For noon today. Right here. That's a lie." "Is it?" I said. straightening the pads of paper on the table. I am negotiating. I'm negotiating the terms of their surrender. My goal was simple. I wasn't going to accuse them of a crime in private. I was going to force them to state their case, their justifications, their lies, in front of a neutral third party. I was going to let them build their own gallows. The conference room felt like a vacuum. The fresh coffee sat untouched, its aroma growing stale. At precisely 12 o'clock, Derek's call, leveraging the false promise of my distress and willingness to negotiate, had worked. Marla and Lena entered first. They had changed. Their clothes were sharper, their expressions a mask of practiced, condescending concern. They smelled my supposed weakness, and they had come to finalize the kill. Aunt Diane, the notary, stumbled in behind them, a pale, nervous woman clutching her handbag as if it were a life preserver. I had asked Sarah, my unflappable day manager, and Jason, my head of maintenance, to join us. They sat at the end of the table, their presence official, their notebooks open. Clara, Marla began, sliding into the chair at the head of the table, a seat she was not offered. I'm glad you've come to your senses. Derek explained you were emotional this morning, which is perfectly understandable. This is a big change. A change I asked. We are only trying to help. Dear. Marla continued, her voice dripping with manufactured pity. You're 61. This lodge, it's a lot. A huge burden. We're here to help you manage your assets, to lift this heavy stress from your shoulders before you burn out. My stress level is not your concern. Marla. My assets are... I slid a thick, bound document across the table. It landed in front of her with a heavy thud. This is the Lantern Cove Operations Manual. I wrote it. And this, I slid a second, slimmer report, is our latest internal audit. I invite you to read page 4. You will see my hobby has had an efficiency increase of 28% year over year. I am not burning out. I am thriving. I turned my gaze to Sarah and Jason. I also have the staff logbook, which notes that at 8:10 this morning, Lena Vale attempted to cancel my personal reservation in my own lodge. Marla's eyes narrowed. The sympathy evaporated. This is a family matter. Clara, I don't know why you've involved your staff. It became a business matter when you forged my signature. The room went silent. Derek, his face pale but resolute, turned to his aunt. Aunt Diane. She visibly jumped, spilling a drop of water on the table. The papers? Derek said, his voice quiet but shaking with a newfound steel. Lena and Marla said you were meeting them at 10 a.m. to finalize the signing. Oh. Derek. No. Diane's voice was a high, thin whine. It wasn't like that. It was just a draft Marla asked me to look it over, just as a sample, to see the proper format. That's all. I didn't notarize anything. It was just a favor, to look at a template. A template. I repeated. I slid the forged deed transfer into the center of the table. Then I slid a blank legal pad and a pen next to it. That's interesting. Because this template has a signature, if you were just reviewing the format, you won't mind showing us what your sample signature looks like? Diane looked as if she might faint. Before Marla could intervene, Lena's composure broke, but it was not the break I expected. Her face crumpled. Tears, real or manufactured, welled in her eyes. Derek, please, she whispered, her voice breaking. She reached a hand toward him. You don't understand. Clara, you can't understand the pressure. I said nothing. It was my mother. Lena cried, turning on Marla. It's always her pushing me, pushing us. To be better. To have more. This was her idea. To secure our future. I was just trying to finally meet her expectations. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I was just trying to survive. It was a masterful performance. The broken daughter. The victim of ambition. I saw Derek's resolve flicker, his instinct to soothe, to keep the peace rising in him. I cut it off. No. Lena. Her sobbing hitched, cut short by the coldness in my voice. You don't get to do that, I said, leaning forward. You can feel whatever you want. Your pressure, your fear, your relationship with your mother, that is your business. And frankly, it is her business. It is not my business. I tapped the forged deed. My business is the action. Your pressure does not excuse forgery. Your fear does not excuse conspiracy. Your desire to secure a future does not give you the right to steal mine. The motive is noise. Lena, the action is the crime. Marla saw Lena's fake victim strategy fail, and her own mask of civility finally cracked. She slammed her hand on the table, making the water glasses jump. How dare you? She spat, her voice a low, venomous hiss. You sit in your little hobby house and judge her. You have no idea what it takes to build a real life, a real legacy. We were doing what was best for this family. We were protecting Derek's future from your incompetence. Protecting me, Derek said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through his mother-in-law's rage like a surgeon's scalpel. Yes, protecting you, Marla shot back. From her, from this anchor holding you down. Is that what you were doing in the car? Protecting me. Derek pulled out his own phone. He pressed a button, and a new voice filled the room, his own, from a recording. The dashcam audio, Derek said, his eyes locked on Lena. It records even when the car is off. We heard Lena's voice, cool and clear. He won't even know it's happening. Mother. We sign the papers. We take control of the asset. And then we move her. It's for her own good. Then Marla's voice. Evergreen Hills residents. I've already spoken to them. They have a memory care unit. Once she's in, it'll be easy to manage her. And the property. A memory care unit. They were going to have me committed. The burden Marla wanted to lift wasn't the lodge. It was me. They were going to bury me alive. Aunt Diane let out a sound, a choked little gasp. Sarah, my manager, stopped writing and her eyes met mine, wide with horror. You were going to put me in a home, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. It's a very nice place. Clara, Marla said, her face hard, all pretense gone. We would have visited, before I could even process the sheer, breathtaking evil of that statement. I looked down at the burner phone, still in my hand. I scrolled past the email from Diane. There was another thread, a saved draft in an email folder. It was addressed to a high-profile commercial real estate broker. The subject line was immediate availability lodge under new management. It wasn't just a takeover. It was a fire sale. You were going to sell it, I said. The shock was a physical weight. You were going to lock me up and sell my home. It's just an asset, Marla screamed. It's just money. Something you know nothing about. Speaking of money, I said, as a sharp, sudden knock came on the conference room door. Sarah, who was closest, opened it. A courier stood there with a time-sensitive overnight envelope. Clara Beaumont, he asked. That's me, I said. I took the packet. It was from the bank. the one I held my business loan with. I tore it open. Inside was a contract, a new loan application, for a very large sum. It was in my name, with my lodge as collateral. But the final page, the disbursement instructions, it directed all funds to be transferred not to me, but to a different account. The account for Vale & Co. Lifestyle. I held up the paper. "This," I said, my voice shaking with a rage so cold it burned, "is bank fraud. That was the final blow. The mask didn't just crack, it shattered. It was for her future." Marla shrieked, standing up so fast her chair fell over. "For my daughter. To give her the life you couldn't give, your son." Aunt Diane dissolved. "She made me," she wailed, pointing a trembling finger at Marla. "She said it was just a sample, just to see the form. She pressured me. I never used my seal." Lena didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just deflated. She slumped forward in her chair, her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking in a deep, silent, broken way. "I did it," she whispered. So quietly we had to lean in. "I deleted them. Your messages. All of them." She looked at Derek, her eyes dead. "From her to you. From you to her. For years. I wanted you to need me more than you needed her. I just wanted to be the one you listened to." The room was silent, save for her quiet, terrible sobs. Sarah and Jason were writing. They wrote down every word. I looked at the wreckage, at Marla, vibrating with hate, at Diane, a puddle of weak excuses, at Lena, a black hole of need, at my son, who looked like he had just watched his whole life burn down. I took a deep, steadying breath. "I still have not called the police," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "But," I let that word "but" hang in the air for a long, heavy moment. The confessions, the accusations, and the raw, ugly truths were all laid bare on the polished table. The emotional part was over. Now, it was time for the consequences. I reached into my bag and pulled out a fresh document. My lawyer, Stephen, had emailed it to me an hour ago, just as I'd asked. I'd had Sarah print 5 copies. "This," I said, sliding a copy to each of them, "is a memorandum of understanding. It has been drafted by my lawyers at Maple Row Legal, and it is not a negotiation. It is a set of terms." Marla scoffed, but Lena and Diane picked it up with trembling hands. "The terms are simple," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "One Vale and Company, and any of its associates, will immediately cease and desist all actions, inquiries, and communications related to my property, my business, and my personal finances. 2. You will, within the next hour, hand over all documents, digital or physical, all passwords, and all communications related to this endeavor." I looked at Lena. 3. You will provide a full accounting of the funds taken from my son's joint account, and you will repay all misspent funds in full within 60 days. 4. You will issue a formal, written apology, not to me, but to my staff and the reputation of this lodge, to be kept on file with my lawyers. And 5, you will both. I looked at Lena and Marla. Accept a 3-month period of legal supervision regarding your compliance with these terms. Lena looked up, her face a mask of pale terror. And if we do, in exchange, I said, I will temporarily refrain from turning this entire box of evidence, the forged deed, the fraudulent loan application, the recordings, and the witness testimony from my staff over to the district attorney. You will have a review period to comply. If you comply fully, I will consider the matter closed. If you fail, in any way— This is extortion! Marla shrieked, throwing the paper across the table. You're blackmailing us. I knew you were unhinged. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I just looked at her, my gaze as cold and hard as steel. No, Marla, this is your one and only chance. This is the door I am offering you instead of a jail cell. You can sign that paper, or you can take your chances with the legal system. But make no mistake, this is your last chance before I pick up that phone and call 911. My words hit her, and for the first time, she had no reply. It was Derek who broke the silence. He hadn't looked at the paper. He was looking at his wife. I'm moving out, he said, his voice raw. Tonight. I'm staying here. At the lodge. I'm suspending our joint accounts. And Mom. He finally turned to me. His eyes filled with a shame so deep it hurt to look at. Every cent that was taken, I will pay it back. I will work. I will pay it back to you. I swear. Lena let out a small, broken sound. She looked from Derek's resolute face to the document. Derek, she whispered, shaking. If I sign this, if I do this, is there a chance for us? Can we save this? It was the moment I could have stepped on her throat, the moment I could have destroyed the last shred of her hope. I didn't. I looked at her, and then at my son. That, I said, is a matter for you and Derek. That is your marriage, and you two have to decide if there is anything left to save. I leaned forward. But I will tell you this. Whatever choice you make, it will no longer be made on my back. It will not be funded by my money, and it will not happen in my home. My part in your drama is over. Aunt Diane, who had been rocking back and forth, pushed her paper forward. I'll sign, she sobbed. I'll write a full confession. I'll testify. I'll cooperate. Marla, she pushed me. Shut up, Diane, Marla snapped. Don't be a fool. She has nothing. I have everything. Marla, I said, and you know it. Marla crossed her arms. Her face was a knot of pure, unadulterated hatred. I will not be bullied. I will not sign. I'm leaving, and I am calling my lawyer. That is your choice, I said, turning to Lena. But yours is independent. What is it going to be? Lena, your mother's approval or your last chance at avoiding a felony. Lena looked at her mother. Marla's face was rigid, demanding loyalty. Then Lena looked at Derek, who just looked away, offering her nothing. And finally, she looked at the paper. She looked at her mother one last time. A long, agonizing moment. Then, with a hand that was shaking so violently she could barely hold it, Lena picked up the pen. Lena's signature was a wet, jagged scratch on the paper. Aunt Diane had already signed her copy, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with quiet, pathetic sobs. My two staff members, Sarah and Jason, sat as silent witnesses, their faces grim. I didn't look at the signed papers. I looked at Marla. She was the epicenter. This was never about helping me. Marla, I said, my voice low and conversational. It was never about my age or my burden. This was about you. She returned my gaze with pure, unadulterated venom. You suffocate your daughter with an impossible standard of perfection, I continued, and you tried to suffocate my son with it. You see people as assets to be managed, not humans to be known. You saw my lodge, and you couldn't stand that I built it, and you couldn't stand that I was happy. This was all just a high-stakes play to prove you were in control. Marla opened her mouth to snap, but it was Lena who spoke, her voice cracked and hollow. She's right. Marla froze. Lena was staring at her hands, which were twisting in her lap. She's right. Mother, it's all I've ever done, my whole life. Just trying to meet the standard. Just trying to be what you said was good enough. She turned her deadened eyes to Derek. Every time I was scared, every time I felt like I was failing you. She gestured toward her mother. I tightened the leash. On Derek. On the money. On everything. I thought if I could just control the image, if I could just make it look perfect, then maybe the fear would stop. Derek, who had been silent, finally spoke. His words weren't for Lena. They were for me. And I was a willing accomplice, he said, his voice raw. I was a passive participant. I knew it was wrong. I knew the silence was a choice. My silence. My desperate need to just keep the peace. That's what let this happen. That's what gave her the power to do it. I am just as much to blame. This was the truth. All of it. Laid bare. I looked at Lena's brokenness, and at my son's pained confession. I believe in boundaries, I said to the room, and I believe in kind boundaries. Lena looked up, her expression lost. I can have sympathy for your fear, I said, looking directly at her. I can understand the pressure your mother put on you. I can even hold space for the fact that you are a broken person, terrified of failure. I let that sit for a beat. But my sympathy for your motive ends where your action begins. I can feel compassion for your fear, but I will not, ever, accept the behavior. You do not get to commit fraud because you are afraid. You do not get to steal from me because you are sad. I gathered the 2 signed copies of the Memorandum of Understanding. I slid them toward Sarah, who nodded, stood, and took them to the office. A moment later, we heard the sharp, efficient sound of the scanner. It's done. Clara, Sarah said, returning. Copies have been scanned and emailed to Maple Row Legal. Your lawyer acknowledges receipt. The finality of it hung in the air. Marla Vale stood up, her chair scraping the floor with a sound of pure violence. You think you're so clever? She hissed. You think you've won. You've just made the worst enemy of your life. You will be hearing from my lawyers. I sincerely hope so, I said, my voice bright and clear. I'm sure they will be fascinated by the fraudulent loan application and the conspiracy charges. Please, have them call Stephen. Now. Get out of my lodge. She stared, vibrating with a rage that had nowhere to go. She turned and stormed from the room, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Aunt Diane, gathering her things, scurried out after her like a frightened mouse. We were left. Me, Derek, and Lena, who sat paralyzed, a ghost at her own execution. Derek cleared his throat. He did not look at his wife. He looked at me. Mom, I'm not going home. Not to that house. I get a room here just for tonight. This was the precipice. I looked at my son. His face wrecked with shame and a dawning, terrible clarity. You can have any room you want. Derek, I said. But you need to be clear about why you're staying. You are not staying here because you're afraid, or because you feel guilty, or because you are running away. You are staying here as a choice, a sovereign choice. made by a man who is deciding his next step. Is that what this is? He met my gaze. The boy was gone. Yes, Mom, he said. It is. Good. I stood. I walked to the head of the table where the box from his trunk, the box of evidence, still sat. I reached in and pulled out one item, the heavy, polished wood case containing his father's naval medals. I turned and held it out to him. There is one more thing. He looked at the box, and his breath hitched. This, I said, my voice suddenly thick, was in that trunk. It was treated like loot, like collateral in your wife's war. This is not just stuff, Derek. This is your father's honor. This is the honor of this family. His hand was shaking as he took the box from me. Its weight seemed to ground him. The main display cabinet in the lobby, I said, my voice firm. It's been dark for a while. You will go out there, right now. You will turn on the light, and you will put this back where it belongs. You will restore it. He clutched the box to his chest. It was not an order. It was a rite of passage. It was the first step back. He nodded, once, and walked out of the conference room, leaving his wife sitting alone at the table. The next morning, the lobby was flooded with sunlight. It was 9 a.m. I was behind the check-in desk, sipping coffee. Derek was sitting in the breakfast nook, nursing his own, his face pale but resolute. He had spent the night in a guest room. Lena, I was told by Sarah, had left sometime in the early hours, taking a taxi. At 9:05, the glass doors swung open. It wasn't just Marla. It was, as promised, the Vale family. An assortment of 6 aunts, uncles, and cousins, all looking sharp, entitled, and ready for their inventory. "We're here," Marla announced, marching toward the desk. She didn't look at me. She looked past me, as if I were furniture. "We have 6 rooms booked. The Vale reservation." I smiled, a bright, tight, customer service smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I'm afraid I don't see that reservation. And in any case," I gestured to the gleaming brass sign Sarah had polished just for this. "The lodge is completely sold out." The sold out sign shone in the morning light. "That's absurd," Marla snapped. "I booked them myself. Get me the manager. Get—" "Sarah, I know you're back there. Stop hiding." She took a step, trying to push past the reception desk. "I am the manager. Marla," I said. "And I am the owner. And you are not welcome here." "You can't do this? We have a—" "A what?" I asked. "A claim." I pressed a button beneath the desk, the large television screen above the fireplace, usually showing scenic photos of the bay, flickered to life. It displayed a high-resolution scan of the Memorandum of Understanding, with Lena's and Diane's signatures clearly visible. Beneath it, I'd added a helpful note. Subject legal consultation. 10:00 a.m. Maple Row Legal. Marla's extended family, the important people, stopped. They squinted at the screen. I heard one of them whisper, "What is—" "Cease and desist." Marla turned purple. "You bitch," she hissed, her voice low and furious. You old, worthless." "Ah, no," I said. "We don't use that language at the Lantern Cove Lodge." I picked up the phone. I didn't dial 911. I honored my promise. I dialed the direct line to Harbour Shield, the private security firm I kept on retainer. "This is Clara Beaumont. I have a trespasser in my lobby who is verbally harassing my staff." "Yes. Thank you." "You'll regret this." Marla shouted, now addressing her family, who were looking at her like she was insane. She's unstable. She needs help. As if on cue, my personal cell phone, sitting on the desk, chimed with an email notification. I picked it up. "Oh," I said. "This is good news." I turned the screen so Derek could see it. It was from the bank, confirming Stephen's injunction. "It appears," I announced to the room, "that the emergency block was successful. All attempts to change account signatories or transfer funds from the lodge accounts have been identified and blocked, pending a full fraud investigation." The blood drained from Marla's face. And then the glass doors opened again. It was Lena. She looked awful. Her hair was a mess. Her eyes were red. But she was carrying a laptop and a file folder. She walked straight past me, past Derek, and stopped in front of her mother. "Here," she said, her voice dead. She shoved the laptop and the folder into Marla's chest. "It's everything. The passwords, the digital files, the contacts. Everything for Vale and Company." Marla just stared at her, dumbfounded. "I'm not doing this anymore, Mother," Lena said. I'm done." "You are a fool," Marla shrieked. "You are throwing your entire life away." Derek stood up. He walked over, not to Lena, but to stand beside me, behind the desk. He put his hands on the oak. "No," he said, his voice shaking but clear. "She's not. But you are." He looked at Marla. "I am separating our finances. Today, we are going to get therapy, if she's willing. If we can't, we will get a divorce. But I am telling you right now, Marla, and all of you." He looked at the bewildered Vale family. "You will never, ever speak to my mother this way again. You will not come near her. You will not come near her home. Are we clear?" The lobby was silent. The Vale family, sensing a spectacular implosion, began to quietly back toward the door. I stepped out from behind the desk. I stood in the center of my lobby, the light pouring in. The audience, my actual paying guests, were watching from the breakfast nook. "I think there has been a misunderstanding," I said, my voice carrying through the entire space. "My daughter-in-law, Lena, and her mother," I pointed, "believed my lodge needed a PR opportunity to elevate it. I want to be perfectly clear. I do not need your PR. I do not need elevating. I require respect. And those who cannot provide it," I looked at Marla, "are not welcome here." At that moment, 2 uniformed Harbour Shield officers entered. They were large, professional, and looked bored. "Ma'am," one said to me, "this woman," I pointed at Marla, "has been asked to leave. She is trespassing." "You can't do this," Marla shrieked as they each took an arm. "Actually," I said, "I can." We watched as they escorted her out the door. The glass closed with a heavy, final thud. In the reflection, all I could see was the bright, clear sign Lantern Cove Lodge. My property was safe. The manipulators had signed their confessions. The boundaries were enforced. Lena was still standing there, looking lost. Derek was still beside me. He had done it. He had chosen. I walked to the desk and pulled out a key. A real key, not a card. The heavy brass key to the main suite, the one Lena had tried to steal. I held it out to Derek. "If you are staying," I said, "you're staying because you choose to, not because she—" I glanced at the door. "Or she—" I glanced at Lena. "Or I—" commanded it. This is your choice. He looked at the key. He looked at me. And he took it. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm so curious where you are all listening from. Please, let me know in the comments. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts on this. Please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video. And if you can, support us by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.